Chapter 3, Lesson 1, Part 2. We're going to start on what is page 77, titled Population Movement, and work through what would be the rest of this section that talks about why people move when they're choosing to live in a certain place. Now, there's an aspect of this that is going to be a reality of the world that we kind of don't like to think about in terms of why people are either pushed to live in a certain place or pulled to live in a certain place. Sometimes that can be a really great thing that somebody has an opportunity to move from one place to the next because there's a better opportunity. But unfortunately, the reality of our world and the sin that exists in our world, there might be a reason why people are pushed to live in a certain place because of the circumstances that surround where they live right now. So there's some depravity that we're going to look at in terms of how serious this is for people. This is life and death. And at the same time, look at the aspect of why you and I have moved from place to place in the world. That brings me to my first question. Have you ever moved? If you have, why did you move from where you were before to where you are now, or where you were? And what were the different factors that went into that type of movement? Was there something better waiting for you, or was there something that you were trying to get away from? We're going to take a look at how many times Mr. Shane has moved and how he doesn't necessarily enjoy the idea of always having to pack and unpack and pack and unpack, because I've moved quite a few times. I want you to guess how many different times that I have moved in my life. Here we go. Have you ever moved? Typically I'd ask you yes or no and want to understand why it is that you moved or why you haven't moved in the course of your life. And then I want to share with you why Mr. Shane has moved, and I want you to take a quick little guess. So as you're watching this video, you'll just have to play along. Mr. Shane has lived in how many different houses? 11. 11 different houses, and I'll explain to you why. When I was growing up, the first house that my parents lived in was the first house that they bought after they had gotten married. My dad works in construction, so he knows how to build houses and work for a construction company. So what does somebody who is a carpenter do when they want to have a bigger house? The first house that we bought was relatively small and only had room for the three of us. As our family was going to get bigger, we needed a little bit bigger house. So they bought a lot and they built a house. And then after we lived in that house for a while, there was another opportunity to sell the house that we were living in and to build another house, because again, my dad's a carpenter, he has connections, and he knows how to do all these things himself, so he can save himself a lot of money in that process. We built another house. And after we built that house, we decided that a little while later on, it was until maybe my junior year in high school, that we wanted to live somewhere else. But in the process of building that house, we were going to build another house or move to another house and fix up another house. We had to find a place to live in between. So we actually rented, I think, 3 or 4 houses in the course of a number of years before we were done building one house and able to move in to the next one. So 11 different houses I've lived in the course of my life. I've moved quite a few times. I've lived in 7 different apartments. So this is probably due to my time in college and the time after college until I've gotten married, to where each and every year you go kind of by year leased to live in one place versus another. And I've lived in 7 different towns, because when I moved to those different houses and moved to those different apartments, a lot of times those are in different places. So if Mr. Shane knows anything about moving, it's the idea of having to pack everything up, go from one place to the next, look at what the opportunities were or the resources were where you lived before and then where they are now. So I want you to think about the different aspects of why people move as we study population movement. You can find yourself on page 77 on the very bottom of the page, or follow along in your online textbook. Population movement is right here on tab number 6. Now I want to look at this guiding question. What are the causes and effects of human migration, human movement? In the first section, we're going to take a look at why that migration takes place. Number 1, migration is one of the main causes of population shifts in the world today. Number 2, push factors drive people to emigrate and include violence, war, persecution, natural disaster, and a lack of jobs. Maybe you haven't heard that word before. Maybe you've heard migration as the reason why people move from place to place. In the fall right now, birds are migrating to the south because it's warmer. People also migrate. They move from place to place. But the word emigrate is different. On page 78, the cause of migration, emigrate means to leave one's home to live in another place. So emigration is to leave one's place. The E at the beginning of it, I like to think about it, remember it as exiting. Migration is movement. Emigration is I'm leaving, I'm exiting a location. Those push factors that might cause somebody to leave a place or emigrate include violence, war, persecution, natural disaster, and a lack of jobs. We're going to talk about push and pull factors. Why would you want to leave someplace? Well, all these things sound really, really terrible and might be things that you don't ever want to deal with. A lot of these things actually put your life in danger. The violence that's happening, the war that might break out in your country, persecution because of your beliefs and your religion, or what if your entire city was destroyed in a hurricane or an earthquake or a volcano and you had to move completely? Different types of natural disasters displace people all the time, or the place that you lived in that had a job for you all of a sudden doesn't have a job for you and you need to find another job. That might involve emigrating or moving, exiting that place to find some other type of work opportunity. The opposite of a push factor is a pull factor. These are the ideas that would attract people to an area and include the presence of maybe friends, family, education opportunities, and jobs. Push factors are kind of the reality of the world and the sin of the world that has this world broken. The pull factors might be the good things about the world that would be attractive to people to move to a certain place based on opportunity. For example, Mr. Shane moved from his small town in Marion, Wisconsin to Milwaukee for the opportunity to go to college. When I was in college, I met my wife and now have the opportunity to continue to teach here at Garden Homes. But we have moved from what were a couple different apartments in Milwaukee. We actually lived over by Woodman's and Milwaukee Vincent for a year, and then we bought our house in Pewaukee because it's halfway between where my wife's family lives and it's halfway between where we work here in Milwaukee. It's right down on Capitol Drive. Lastly, the effect of migration can include cultural blending and urbanization. So if people are moving because of these bad things that are happening, people are moving because there are good opportunities. When those people move, where they move to is going to cause people to have to interact, and there's going to be cultural blending and what is called urbanization. Cultural blending is the idea that one person from one part of the world, one background, moves to a place, and then one person from another part of the world, one background, moves to a place, and now those cultures blend together. If you look at our classroom, that'd be an example. If you've lived in Milwaukee your whole life, I haven't lived in Milwaukee my whole life. If you've lived in a city your whole life, I've lived in farm country, and I grew up working in the summer times on farms and in a small town, and my aspects and my experiences might be very different from yours. That would blend our cultures together by us being able to spend time with each other and learn about each other and the different aspects of our life. That's true on a global scale when people are moving from place to place. Urbanization is effective migration because a lot of times when people move, they're going to move where resources are abundant. A lot of times people believe and think that, well, bigger cities have more opportunities. Bigger cities have more job opportunities. That's true. Bigger cities have maybe more living opportunities because there are more places to live. There are more apartments. There are more houses because the population has been large for a number of years, or it's a growing area. Migration might cause more people to move to cities rather than to trying to fend for themselves and live in more rural areas in a spread out area. So a lot of times when people are moving, they're moving to cities. That process is called urbanization. Now, on page 78 and 79, you're going to read about the causes of migration. Those are our push and pull factors. And then the effects of migration on page 79 that take us to the cause of urbanization. What are the causes of human migration? Those are our push and pull factors. Push factors, why people would want to leave a specific place. Pull factors, why people would want to go to a specific place. A lot of times those influences of migration are based on each person's individual experience. So you can probably answer this, why did you move? Why did you migrate if you've ever have in your life? And look at the push and pull factors and look at the reality of the world and the sin that's in this world that causes people to move based on life and death situations. The refugees that are leaving their country because of the war and torn nature of that place, where can they find something that would allow them to have what would be a satisfying and sustained life? The aspect on page 80 is all about the causes and effects of urbanization, and it talks about what urbanization creates in terms of a huge, massive, major city called a megalopolis. Now, this megalopolis are places that are completely out of control in terms of their overall population. This can be a good thing, but a lot of times it ends up being detrimental because these places can't support the massive population that are in those areas. And lastly, in your own words, summarize why people emigrate from their homelands. Emigrate means to exit. Again, that's probably the reasons that are push factors, not pull factors. If you take a look at this map, you can see on this map the different colors of each of the different countries in our world. If that country is blue, that means people are moving to that place. They want to go to that location. If the country is green, means the population has stayed relatively the same. The same amount of people that have left have come, and the population hasn't really changed a whole lot. If the country is orange, those are places that people are leaving on a greater rate, a greater scale than they are coming to. I would hope you recognize the positive aspect that people want to live in the United States. Even with the turmoil and things that are going on, the freedoms that we offer and the opportunities that we offer are reasons why people from other countries are coming to our location. A lot of people are coming to the different locations in Europe and obviously different places throughout what would be Africa, South America, Australia. People are leaving certain situations and moving to other situations to try and benefit themselves and to benefit maybe even their family. Last aspect I'd like you to think about was that essential question at the very beginning of Chapter 1. How do people adapt to their environment? Well, one of those adaptations that they have to take on is the idea of where they want to live and why they want to live there. And there might be factors that either push or pull people to live in the places that they live. Your homework for today is to take a look at those push factors, those pull factors, and to answer what those effects might be of global migration. The effects in terms of urbanization and the effects in terms of, well, what are these countries doing that are either allowing people to come to their place, allowing people to come in, or they're not allowing people to come in. Those can be two things to think about in terms of how people might move from one place to another. Is it actually illegal? Is it allowed? Or is it something that different countries have laws set up that say, well, there's a legal way that you can come in and people are trying to overrule that and come in illegally? Or there's places that say, yeah, we're welcoming everybody, and what are the sometimes negatives and or positives of having those open borders and that open migration to what would be the entire globe itself. Finish this portion up, please. Thank you.